Hello, and thank you for pushing play and joining us in our little corner of the online universe. Welcome to State of the Arts, a podcast which is supported by Fís Éireann, Screen Ireland, through the Screen Stakeholders Funding Scheme. I'm Des Doyle, a writer, director, and creative consultant with more than 25 years' experience in the worlds of film and TV production, and I will be your host as every 2 weeks we bring you a new episode which will focus on someone who's been extremely successful in their chosen medium and will be both a look at their creative careers and current upcoming projects, as well as their take on some of the major news stories currently having an impact in their field of artistry. There will be 6 episodes in season 1 of the pod, and if you would like us to do more than that, then please add us to your playlists. Follow us on our Instagram at SOTAPod, that's SOTAPOD, and help us spread the word about the show. And of course, please let us know what you like and what you might like us to change as we go along. Today on State of the Arts, we're joined by Stephen S. DeKnight, a writer, producer, showrunner, and director. Stephen attended the University of California at Santa Cruz, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in theatre arts and went on to earn an MFA in playwriting from UCLA. He got his start in the entertainment industry as a staff writer on the groundbreaking television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He then wrote, directed, and produced on the series Angel, Smallville, and Dollhouse, before creating and running the hit series Spartacus for the premium cable channel Starz. From there, he went on to executive produce and showrun season 1 of the acclaimed Marvel Netflix series Daredevil. He made his feature directorial debut with Pacific Rim Uprising, the sequel to Guillermo del Toro's international hit. He is currently the creator, executive producer of Spartacus House of Ashur, the Spartacus spin-off series for Lionsgate Starz. A lover of comic books since before he could read, DeKnight has penned issues of Wolverine, Black Widow, and Conan the Barbarian for Marvel. He has also recently published his first 2 original graphic novels, Hard Bargain, a 1940s supernatural detective noir for the acclaimed French comic book company Humanoids, and Beneath, a tense socially relevant horror story for Comixology Amazon. Stephen, I'm delighted that you're joining us this week on State of the Arts. It's a real thrill to have you on. Thank you for taking the time out for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Always nice to talk to you, Des.
If we could start maybe with talking a little bit about House of Ashur, because at the point that we're recording at, it's not too far away from the launch date for the show. Does that come with a mix of excitement and apprehension, or which one is more prevalent at this point in time?
Oh, everything I do comes with that kind of mix. You just never know if the audience is going to embrace what you're doing or not care for it. I always talk with other creators and we all feel the same. When you're making something, when you're in the middle of it, you just have no perception of usually how well it's going, because you could be working on something that feels like a disaster and then it's a huge success, and quite the opposite. You can be working on something that you think, oh my god, this is just amazing, this is the best work I've ever done, and it comes out and it just flops. So you never know. In fact, when I was working on season 1 of Daredevil for Netflix, when I wrapped that season, I told my wife, I said, well, this could end my career, because I was just so deep into it. All I saw were the little problems that I knew existed and all the struggles. And then when it came out and did very well, I was delighted and surprised.
I think that's the same for any creative, isn't it? Like when you look back on your own work, all you're doing is kind of seeing the stuff that you don't like, or the issues that arise. Although I think you'd find it hard to find fault with season 1 of Daredevil, in all fairness now. With House of Ashur, I'm just curious how this journey on this particular show started for you. I'm wondering, was this an approach from Lionsgate and Starz? Because I can kind of see from their point of view, because the original series was such a defining kind of show for Starz when at that point in time, and obviously it sold very well internationally. So from Lionsgate's point of view, I can also see their interest. Was it them approaching you, asking you, did you want to return to Spartacus universe, or did you actually have an idea that you yourself really wanted to do at that point in time?
Yeah, interesting story. Kevin Beggs, who's the head of Lionsgate Television, fantastic executive, one of the best in the business, and I've known him forever. When Lionsgate acquired Starz, almost immediately, Kevin would call me up a couple of times a year and say, "You want to do some more Spartacus? How about some more Spartacus?" And I was intrigued, but I was always busy. And the original show was really hard. It was really a grueling process. So I wasn't really ready to jump back into that world. And but much to Kevin's credit, he kept, approaching me, and he finally caught me at just the right time, where I wasn't doing anything that was taking 110% of my attention, And I added enough distance from the original show to take a breath and go, okay, now this is interesting. What would I do? So I started kicking around ideas, and it was the usual suspects at first. It was, well, what about a show about Caesar? My feeling was, we've seen a lot of Caesar. Everybody knows Caesar. And then it was, well, what about Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey for the triumvirate, and how they basically dismantle the Republic. And I thought that's a great idea and a very expensive idea. I want to make sure whenever I create a show, I want to make sure it's budget conscious so it has legs and it can run multiple seasons and not get so expensive that, the plug is pulled, which I believe is one of the things that happened to HBO's Rome, a show that I loved, but it was so massively expensive. At some point, it just doesn't make sense to continue. And then I kicked around Antony and Cleopatra, but same problem. Super expensive. Has to be like 20 million an ep, which is an insane amount of money. And then I circled back to an idea that I used to joke about in the writer's room of the original show. Because in the original show, in Vengeance, Ashur, played by Nick Terabay, tells Lucretia, the amazing Lucy Lawless, that he's been promised by Glaber that if he helps bring down Spartacus, that he's going to be gifted Batiatus's Ludus and Villa. And he says, and it'll be the rise of the house of Ashur. And I love the Ashur character so much, and working with Nick Terabay so much, that the next season, after Ashur got his head chopped off in the original show, whenever we would be working on a story and we get to a part that was difficult and we couldn't figure it out, I would always joke, man, we should have done House of Ashur. That would have been a really fun show. So when this opportunity came up to do a spinoff, I thought, you know what? What if it's a story that is a what if? What if Ashur hadn't died? What if the House of Ashur became a reality and he got everything he wanted? Um, and somebody who is such, Ashur is a complicated character. He's a horrible person, murderer, rapist, traitor, but all that comes from, he just wanted to be basically part of the gang. He wanted to be accepted and loved, and he wasn't. So he turned bitter. So what really interests me is, given a second chance, can he become a better person? Or is that just who he is? Will he always default to these his baser nature? So I came up with this nutty idea, and my first thought was, well, nobody's ever going to go for that. Lionsgate and Starz are going to look at me like I'm crazy, but well, what the hell? This is the one that I'm excited about. So I sent them like a 1-page pitch. And to my absolute amazement, they said, we love it. Let's do it. And the next thing I had to do, when I said, well, hang on a second, I can't do this without Nick Terabay. I got to make sure he's interested and available. So I called Nick and said, Nick, you free? You want to do House of Ashur? And he just was completely in from the start. He loved the idea. And then we were off and running. And I'm still shocked that this show is going to be on the air, because to me, it was such a kooky idea. And I should also say, it almost died at one point because I was really doubting if this was the way to go. So I pitched it to my wife, Jamie, and I said, I don't know about this. What do you think? And she said, I love it. So I go, oh, great. And here we are, a couple of weeks away from the premiere of season 1.
Was it important to you at the point, once you got the green light to get the show up and running, to try and bring some original writers back who had been on the show, or writers who had worked with you previously for the room? Because I recognize a few familiar names in there from both Spartacus and Jupiter's, from the credits that are up there on IMDb.
Yeah. I would have loved to have had as many of the original Spartacus writers back, but they have all gone on to run their own shows, and I'm very proud of them. So most of them weren't available. I was extremely lucky to get Aaron Helbing, who was on all the way through the original show. He was writing with his brother Todd Helbing, and they were just absolutely fantastic. You'll probably remember that they wrote the episode Libertas, where Spartacus and his rebels literally brought down the arena. So just a fantastic pair of writers. They had disengaged to do their own thing. Aaron went off to run the second season of Nightfall, and I caught him at just the right time because he had some projects that he was doing, but like all of us, we have multiple projects, and sometimes things just don't work out for whatever reason. So he was free, and he heard about the show, and he reached out and said, "Hey, if you need any help, let me know." I'm like, "Oh Jesus, yes, come help me." So he's my right hand man, my executive producer, and it was great to have somebody there that knew the original show and how it was made and all the nuts and bolts. And then, yeah, I brought in Henry Jones, who I had worked with on Jupiter's Legacy, and I brought in Adam Bradley as my writer's assistant. He had been my assistant on Jupiter's Legacy, and now in season 2, he's a staff writer. And then for the rest, I just started interviewing writers. I reached out to my agency, CAA, and my management company, Anonymous Content, and they sent me fantastic people. And I just putting together a room is really a bit of alchemy. You could be the best writer in the world, but your personality also has to gel with everybody in the room. So getting that to work is always a little bit of magic. But the room just really came together. Just a fantastic group of talented, dedicated people who are they just love the show. They love what we're doing, and yeah, we just couldn't wait to get into work every day. We had so much fun working on that fourth season.
Did you know at the start that was it a two-season order from the get-go in terms of scripts?
No, no, I always go into it unless it's a limited series where it's okay. This is like 6 or 8, and that's it for the show. I always, when I'm thinking about ideas, I want to make sure it has 4 to 7 seasons in there, and things can always change. For House of Ashur, I had always planned on somewhere around 5. That could get shorter, that could get longer, depending on the creative side. But we knew going in that Stars and Lionsgate wanted this to be a continuing series, not just a one-off. So I had plans for all of that. Whether or not you get a second season is always, who knows. But thankfully, Lionsgate and Stars both were very supportive of starting the season 2 writers' room early, so we had the scripts ready. So if the show's a hit, we can go into pre-production and get it back on the air as quickly as possible.
Can I ask, just in terms of the timeframes for those, when roughly was the season 1 room set up? And was there a long gap between that finishing and the season 2 room being set up? Or was that a more 'cause I'm sure on the timeline you were on, the strikes probably got in the way somewhere along the way, didn't they?
Yeah, we actually I was in the process of putting the writers' room together when these strikes happened. I was rushing to get the contracts into place, but I was about 2 weeks short of that. So during the strike, I would see the writers on the picket lines, and I would reach out to them saying, "Hey, I just want to tell you, when this is over, want to go straight back into it." And literally, when it was announced the strike had been settled, I think it was late one evening. The moment that it was officially over was like at midnight, and I'm not kidding you. Like 12:01 a.m., Lionsgate called me and said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yes, we are ready." So we went right into it. And the break between when we finished writing season 1 and started season 2, I think it was about 4 months or so, maybe 4 or 5 months. It might have been slightly longer because, of course, we finished writing the scripts, and then I was in the process of, we were shooting. So that took some time. But then we got back together and got back into it. and really excited for season 2, assuming season 1 does well.
It's a 10 episode order for season 1, right? Which is on the higher end of kind of what's happening in terms of season orders at the moment. How long does it take you to write 10 episodes for the show?
The entire process, usually we're in the writer's room for about, I'd say, 4.5, 5 months in the writer's room. And then once the writer's room closes, I generally I will write the first episode and the last episode. In season 1, I wrote the first episode, co-wrote episode 5, and wrote the last episode, which I will never ever do again. Quickly just remembered why I don't write anything except the first and the last, because it's a time crunch. I can't be away from the room and helping to polish scripts and all of this stuff to actually write a script in the middle. After the room wraps, I generally will spend 6 to 8 weeks polishing scripts and writing the finale, which we already broke, but I just need the time to clean everything up and get it ready for production. And that includes addressing all the studio network notes, historical consultant notes, and notes that we make along the way. Because as we're breaking a season, we might get to episode 9 and go, oh shit, we need to go back into episode 5 and just drop in this little thing. So there's a lot of that going back and forth and just making everything is really knit it together properly.
And were you doing that in New Zealand where the show was shooting at the time, or were you still based out of LA at that point in time? Or
In LA, yeah, it's interesting when they delivered the budget for season 1. And I was going over the line items and just making sure, everything was jiving with what I knew was in the script. And I came across a line item that said, showrunner. It was for housing in Auckland, New Zealand, for like 6 months. And I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I love New Zealand, but I can't be out of the States for 6 months because I'm dealing with all the stuff here. So I have in the original show, I had the amazing Rob Tappert, Sam Raimi's producing partner, who was in New Zealand overseeing all the production side. He was unavailable this time around, so he suggested that I bring in the amazing Rick Jacobson. Rick was a director in the original series, and then he became our producing director, helping us produce the show. So he's my man in New Zealand. He is the other half of my brain. Could not do the show without him. So he covers everything in New Zealand, and we're constantly Zooming and texting and sending emails. And I'm here in LA, concentrating on the scripts. And thankfully, the one good thing that came out of the pandemic was video conferencing and Zoom. So we can have all these meetings virtually. Where in the original show, all of the meetings I had with New Zealand were conference calls just on a speaker, which makes it very difficult. So yeah, so I'm mostly based in LA. I go to New Zealand when we're in production 4 or 5 times during the shoot, just back and forth, just to check in and hang out. But the New Zealand crew, Rick and the New Zealand crew, are so fantastic. I never have to worry about what's going on there.
did you ever consider trying to work it so that you could potentially direct one of the episodes in this season? Because obviously you've directed a lot of TV hours in the past and on shows that you've worked on before. Or did the logistics on this just make that kind of too difficult an option?
I got to tell you, every single season of Spartacus and the original show, I was supposed to direct the finale. And every single time I would get to the end and I'd have to tell Rob Tappert, look, I'm still polishing scripts. I'm exhausted from the writing side. I've got to bow out. It was the exact same thing this time around. I was supposed to direct the finale this first season of House of Ashur, and I got to the end of the writing process and it's like I had to call Rick up and say, Rick, I can't do it. I'm on my last leg here. And Rick really tried to convince me to suck it up and come down because he would have to direct it if I didn't. So unfortunately, I had to put the onus on him. But and I've told him this. I said, Rick, you did the job you did on the finale is 1,000 times better than I could have done. Nobody knows how to shoot this show like Rick. Rick Jacobson shot the series finale of the original, and I still don't know how he did it. It was way too big for the amount of time and money we had, but somehow he shot it all. So, Rick's my go-to guy when I just don't have enough intestinal fortitude to go down and direct. I'm really hoping that, over the course of House of Ashur, I get down there, to direct 1 or 2. But truth be told, between the writing and all the other projects I have, it's really difficult to carve out that kind of time and attention that the show needs.
With season two is basically it's fully written at this stage. Then is that right?
Yeah, I still have to write the finale. We've broken the finale. Yeah, it's fully written, and it's a banger because there are so many juicy things in season 2.
Does it leave you room that kind of based on how the audience reacts to season one, or more specifically to certain characters and certain plot lines in season one, that you could adjust in relation to that reaction? Or is that a road that you don't like to go down, especially on a show that's maybe as intricately plotted as Spartacus can be?
Really difficult because Spartacus is the way it's weaved together. Like you said, it's so intricate. If you pull one thread, it's like the whole thing comes apart. And it's also it's really hard to do that with the 8 to 10 episode model, since the scripts are generally written before you start shooting. It's not like back in the day when I was doing 22 episodes a year, like when we were doing Smallville, and we would get, we were usually about 5 episodes ahead of airing. So when the audience would react really badly to something or a storyline, we had enough room to adjust. Like I remember on Smallville, there was a season, Lana did the whole witch thing, and like and then the audience was like, "Yeah, I don't know about the witch thing." So we were able to go, "All right, no, let's broom this out as fast as possible." But with the shorter orders now, it's like it's impossible to turn the ship that quickly.
Do you miss those days of the 22 at all? Or do you find the workload of the 10 feels like the 22 at this stage?
Well, it's changed so much because I think the general quality of television has gotten much more intensive. Where when everybody was doing 22, could forgive sets that weren't quite dialed in, and things were a little more loosey goosey. But now, because of prestige television and streaming, the audiences have really been conditioned to movie quality TV shows, which is a completely different animal. So it takes us as much time to do 10 episodes as it took to do 22 before, because it's a lot more handcrafted. And that's not to disparage what we did in 22. What we did with 22 episodes, I am continually amazed by. Some really phenomenal television. And I loved doing 22. But, I was on staff. I was not running the show. Would I want to run a show with 22 episodes? Oh, hell no. It's all I can do to do 10 to 13. And talking about the number of episodes, I strongly feel I don't want to do less than 10. To me, especially for an audience member, I want a little bit more. And there are some shows that work great for like 6. Like Slow Horses, 6 is perfect. I mean, they tell a really great story. It's really riveting. But I'd find it difficult to squeeze everything into Spartacus in like 6 episodes, with the exception of the prequel Gods of the Arena, but that was its own thing. For me, I like 10 to 13. On season 1 of Daredevil, we were able to do 13, which was great because we had enough elbow room. The problem is, the less episodes you get, you have less opportunity to explore things that aren't right on the plot. Daredevil's a perfect example. If we had only had 10 episodes, we never would have done the Fisk backstory episode, which was one of my favorites. there's just no room. You got to service the plot. But 10's a bit of a sweet spot, especially for Spartacus. And the original Spartacus, we really experimented. We did 13 the first season, 6 for the prequel, and then we settled into 10, which really seemed to work not only budget wise, but for the story. It just kept it tight, but we still had enough room to explore.
It's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the HBO Max series, The Pit.
Yeah.
This is the Noah Wiley, the medical drama as well. I've recently seen it described as a procedural
Mm,
because it's a procedural show, but it's on a streamer.
yeah.
So, and we're even though we're doing 15 episodes, we're trying to still elevate what we're doing within the format. It feels like there's a kind of a dichotomy there, I think, for the audience sometimes because like audiences, I think, love those extended seasons. If that's the kind of TV that you grew up with, where people were kind of nearly in your home every week while you were watching those shows. But would they want to trade off the increase in quality and production value and aesthetic and everything else that you're getting
Yeah.
that they've gotten quite used to at this point in time? I'm not sure they would.
It's a thorny issue. That's why for me, I feel like 10 is the sweet spot. It's also the sweet spot for me as a showrunner because it's enough to make me exhausted, but not want to throw myself out a window. Because I remember the first season of the original Spartacus, the room had wrapped, but I still had 5 episodes that I had to polish and rewrite. Well, 4 episodes I had to polish and rewrite, and I had to write the finale, and I had like 4 weeks to do it, that's all I did. And by the end, I couldn't even see straight. Um, but with 10, I think you can tell a really great story. It gives the audience enough to hang their hat on, and you can still have it look really great.
Going forward, obviously season 2, hopefully you get to do season 2 that there's a big enough reaction. I'm expecting there will be. There seems to be a huge amount of buzz on the internet already about the show coming. Would you want to stay locked in for the whole run of the show potentially, or are there other ideas that you've got going on in, other shows or movies or whatever that you're working on that you might want to gravitate to if the show gets into a successful stride and you feel you can hand it over, or would you feel very proprietary with it and want to keep going all the way through?
I definitely want to keep going all the way through because I love the show and I love working with Nick Terabay and the rest of the cast. So it would break my heart not to be a part of it, and I would just feel like I'm missing out. I do have a bunch of other projects going, and you always in this day and age, since we don't do 22 anymore, unless you're on an overall deal, and an overall deal is when a studio pays you a big chunk of money per year to be exclusive to them. Unless you're on an overall deal, you got to hustle other projects since you're not getting 11 months of work out of the year. So I've got a bunch of other projects, a bunch of TV shows, a couple of movies, one that I'm supposed to direct if the casting comes together. But I want to work it around the schedule of the show. And thankfully, since we have season 2 basically written, that'll give me a little bit of elbow room. But I have full intention of being a part of this show for the run of its life.
I think fans will be very happy to hear that as well.
I love the world.
One of the other things that you've been doing in recent years as well is writing for comic books.
Yes.
There was some work for Marvel with Wolverine and Conan and stuff, but there's also 2 original books that you've done yourself as well with Beneath and with Hard Bargain. I really enjoyed Beneath, but I absolutely loved Hard Bargain. That world, I think it's
Well,
just
thank you.
fantastic. Yeah, that whole noir horror space. There's a slightly John Constantine vibe off it as well, I think, which I really kinda love as well. It feels ripe for both more stories in that universe, maybe as books, but also potentially as IP that you've created that maybe you could do something with on the film and TV side. What are your thoughts in regards to Hard Bargain there?
Oh, absolutely. I like to do both. A hard bargain. In my forward, I talk about how it was a passion project, 30 years in the making. I actually had the idea before I broke into the business. I'd written a bunch of notes on it and characters, and story arcs, and settled on this as the first story and introducing the world. But I would love to do more. I'd always planned in success, the next one would be a book of standalone tales to expand the characters, where Frank Harding is always part of it, but not necessarily the center. And then I've got a big, grand, like 5 season plan for the whole thing. I would love to have the time to get back and do more of that. And Bruno Hang, who did the colors, and Lino Carvalho just did such a fantastic job. Just beautiful, beautiful work. And yes, my team and I are discussing how best to expand it into either features or television or even an animated series.
It could lend itself really well to an animated series if replicating that style because it's so strong visually, like the whole world.
I've been leaning towards animation also because it's period. There are a lot of effects. It would be very, very, very expensive as a TV show.
Sorry, for anybody who isn't familiar with the story, could you give us a little brief synopsis of what Hard Bargain is about?
Yeah, it's basically I grew up loving the stories of Raymond Chandler. Hard boiled, two fisted private detective. It's a story set in 1940s Los Angeles about Frank Harding, a private detective who specializes in unusual, often supernatural cases. He gets involved in a case that has kind of echoes and ripples into his own family's past. And yeah, I won't give away more than that. But I love also movies like The Maltese Falcon, Murder My Sweet, things like that. I always love that dialogue and that feel.
The Chandler Marlowe kind of vibe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Just I eat that stuff up, and I always wanted to do something in that arena. And thankfully, humanoids. Because for years, every now and then, I would pitch it to a comic book company, and they say, "Nah, we got this, and we got that, and it's too close to that." But the project actually came about. John Cassaday, the amazing comic book artist, he did Planetary and a bunch of other stuff. Who unfortunately passed away. He was working with humanoids to help bring in talent, and he called me up because I had talked to him about this years ago, and he said, "Hey, you want to come into humanoids and pitch this?" And I did, and they said, "Yeah, let's do it." And I'm like, "Oh, thank God." I really just I still can't believe I was able to finally do it because, like I said, it was a passion project for 30 years, which is also something to throw out there to other writers, creators. The ideas that you love that didn't sell, hang on to them. There'll be a place for them eventually. It's also like the guy who created Squid Game. He tried for I think a decade to get that made, and nobody wanted it until somebody did, and that's all it takes.
And then it became the most successful show in the history of Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really hope you do more books, animation, whatever. I'll take it all. I love the characters. I love the world. So please do more. Just in terms of, I'm curious about, are there different headspaces that you need to get into as a writer for? I'm writing for film. I'm writing for TV. I'm writing for comic books. What are the kind of different requirements or challenges that each kind of medium sets for you?
Yeah, well, creatively, no. I mean, creatively, it's all in that mix. It's more of a formatting issue. TV and movies are very, very close. I basically do the same thing. Difference in features, I try to do that 3-act structure, classic 3-act structure. But really, in a season of TV, I do the same thing. I try to have beginning, middle, and end, and really drive to that. Comics are a little different. I always say it's where art meets math because you have to be very exact about the number of panels on a page. You don't want to have too many because you want to give the artist enough room to really do their thing. And you also have to be cognizant if you're doing issue by issue, you either have like 20 or 22 pages per issue. So you've got to really figure out, okay, where am I hitting what? And then you have to be cognizant of the page turn about, okay, I want to have this big reveal. Well, I can't have it at the end of the page. I want the reader to turn the page and go, "Oh shit." So all of that is very tricky. And when you get notes to do any kind of rewriting on a comic book script, your head will explode. It's like, "Wow, I can't move this because then this doesn't work and this doesn't land on the right page." And so it's very, very tricky, but also wonderful. When I first started experimenting with comics, before I was actually hired to write comics, I read a bunch of comic scripts. Of course, Alan Moore, the god of comics.
Genius.
Yes, I read a bunch of his scripts. But then Alan Moore, if you ever read one of his scripts, he knows exactly what he wants. I mean, he is very, very detailed in his scene description. But I kind of went in a different direction. I wanted to give the artist as much leeway as possible. So my scene direction is much closer to what I would do in a feature or a TV show, where I give them exactly what they need, but I'm not an artist. I want them to have the leeway to come up with stuff that I wouldn't necessarily think about.
Room for interpretation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they did a fantastic job. Like in Beneath, Michael Gaydos, incredible artists, worked with Brian Michael Bendis on Alias, which was Jessica Jones. The stuff he came up with was incredible. For instance, if you read Beneath, there's a very different color palette for each section, depending on what's going on. That's not in the script. That's He came up with that because he does the art and the colors. And I told him, I said, I love it. This is great. To me, I don't want to sidetrack into the whole AI thing, but I love artists. I love working with artists. I love that unpredictable human element that they bring. When I was growing up reading comics, I desperately wanted to be a comic book artist, but I didn't have any real artistic talent on that side. So working with artists on comics and graphic novels is just the biggest thrill for me. I just love what they do so much.
I loved actually that DC came out with a big statement there recently saying they're not accepting any AI art or scripts or whatever. But it is obviously it's quite a challenging topic at the moment. I don't know if you saw the announcement from Bob Iger today, where he was saying that Disney Plus is going to allow some AI generated user content onto the platform, which seems like a really strange decision to be making for a company that's simultaneously suing Midjourney and a number of other AI companies for copyright theft. Not going into the whole rabbit hole, but what is your general vibe or take, or how do you think the town in LA feels at the moment about it? Does it feel more pro AI or anti AI, like from the creative ranks?
Depends what part of the town. I think, it's obviously very attractive to the people that pay money to have content created, because you can do it at a fraction of the cost. For the creatives, it's like, no, you know, it's it's taking away that human element, that soul. And I've seen a lot of arguments on social media from people who use AI to create art, who says it's just as valid as an artist creating art, which I disagree with. I don't think, I'm not saying it's not a very useful tool. It's absolutely a useful tool.
Used by a human.
Yes, but I personally don't want to watch an AI generated piece of entertainment. That's, for many reasons, not the least of which is the AI models are created by scraping the work of other people who are not being compensated. It's thievery. It's absolute thievery. And then, we could get really deep down the rabbit hole about the environmental impacts of the places. But look, obviously AI is not going anywhere. It's a question of how we use it, and do we use it responsibly? And there are certain segments of the entertainment industry that I think it's going to hit very hard, like visual effects artists, you know. But my sincerest hope is that it becomes a tool for visual effects artists and not a replacement. But people who are claiming that AI artists are in the same league world as actual artists who have studied for years and years. I think that's just a ridiculous assumption. Look, I can sit here, bring up one of the AI models and type something in, and it will give me a beautiful image. I'm not an artist. I'm a creative typist. Uh, that's it.
This may follow on a little bit from what we've just been talking about there, but I'm curious, what does the world of the showrunner feel like for you in 2025 with challenges in terms of, the production contraction, everybody's looking at budgets and spend, people are generally making far less than they were making before. Is it much harder to get a pitch across the line in this day and age? Are there new things being asked of you in 2025 that weren't even a few years ago?
Well, it's always hard to sell anything. I always say it's a miracle anything ever gets made, and it's a double miracle anything good ever gets made. It's an uphill battle. The stars have to align, lightning has to strike for you to be able to get anything across the line. Not to mention, you can sell things. I've sold plenty of things that never got made. I mean, Hollywood is littered with that because, executives change, the audience, their interests change. So you just never know. That's why you got to throw as much stuff up against the wall as possible and hope something sticks. The contraction was inevitable. You cannot sustain 500 plus shows a year. You just can't. There's not, the audience isn't there for that many. So, creatives like me, we always expected this to happen. The question wasn't if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And I think a lot of studios kind of followed Netflix off a cliff with the streaming, and to really combat Netflix and be competitive, they threw a lot of big money onto their shows. But the simple reality is you can't sustain a model of spending 20 million plus per episode. It's not financially feasible. Not to mention, I always, other creators and I are always talking about, we want the budget to be more contained because part of our deal is the back end, where if the show does well, we share in the profits. If you're spending 20 million in ep, you are never going to see a profit on that show. You're never going to see a back end. So coming back to Spartacus was very interesting because we approached it the same way we did the original show. We want to make it for a very reasonable budget. And so we can have a longevity and people can share in the back end and success. The quickest way to get your show, pulled is for it to be too expensive. And because when you get that expensive, you got to be a massive hit. So for me, look, like I said, contraction, inevitable. It was inevitable that people would stop spending crazy money per episode, unless it's like a huge, huge property like Andor. You see every penny on the screen. Phenomenal, fantastic. But not every show is an Andor. And the other thing that's interesting coming back to Spartacus after, 12, 13 years was how much technology has advanced. Because if you go back and look at the original show, we did a lot with the tools that we had, and our visual effects people were fantastic. And it's the same visual effects people this time around as well. The difference is the technology. What we can do now, mostly because of Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine changed everything. The original show, if we had a big vista where were sweeping over the city, they had to build it. The VFX team had to build it, and they had to bake in all the lighting. And if you wanted to change something, if you wanted to change the camera movement to where the sun was, you'd have to undo all that. It was just really expensive and time consuming. With Unreal Engine, they build the world, and literally I'm on the computer zooming with them and say, hey, can the sun be a little lower? They lower the sun. Everything changes. It's all done right there. It not only speeds it up, makes it cheaper, but when you see the new show, you'll go, "Holy shit, the effects are amazing." And that's because of Unreal Engine and the advances in visual effects.
The showrunner truly becomes God in this circumstance. You can lower the sun for me. I'm curious as well, just again, in terms of state of play of things currently, I always remember, I think the first time I met you, you told me the story about writing a spec script that got you the job at Buffy at the time. Is spec script still a thing? It seems to be in features that's still working and people are able to sell spec, even quite good deals for some recently. In TV, is spec script still a thing in terms of a way for a writer to potentially be getting work?
Yeah, well, it depends in what way. People still write spec scripts to sell series. Although at the moment, it seems like buyers are more interested in pitches than scripts, which is always baffling to me. You'd think you'd want a script to see exactly what the show is, but that doesn't seem to be the prevailing wisdom at the moment. And it always kind of ebbs and flows back and forth. The really interesting thing about spec scripts is writing a spec script based on an existing TV show to shop around as a sample. That unfortunately doesn't really happen much, if at all, anymore. Most people want to see original material. I personally love seeing both. I always tell writers, hey, have an original, and if you have the time, do a spec of your favorite TV show. Because what that shows the showrunner is that you can emulate the voice of somebody else, which is really important. And back in the 22 episodes a year model, everybody had a spec based on another show. Like you said, that's how I got hired on Buffy. I wrote a spec Buffy. But now I never see spec scripts based on other shows. People just don't do them anymore, which is a shame because I also think it's a really great exercise for an up and coming writer. The first spec I ever wrote was a spec Deep Space Nine, which was a great learning experience for me to get into TV with an existing structure and characters. And then the second one was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was my last spec script, thankfully.
I would still love to read that spec DS9 someday if you ever felt like sharing. I'll just put that out there.
It is like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's in a storage facility somewhere. And if I can ever find it, I think it's in a box all the way in the back because I don't even have a digital copy. Because back when I wrote it, we were saving things on those diskettes. So somewhere in that, it'll probably be found after I pass away, but it's in there somewhere, and it's a hoot. I love that script.
There's a quote that I saw you give in an interview recently, and I thought was really interesting. And if I might just give you the quote back and ask you maybe if you could expand on this a little bit. I often have this argument with some studio people when I'm working on a project. This is not all of the studio guys. There are some great studio execs, but there's also this constant push that they don't want the audience to be confused at any point. And I always point out there's a difference between being confused and wanting to know information. Those are two completely different things. And I think especially in the age where a lot of streamers are pushing this whole concept of second screen TV,
Yes.
where they want something so dumbed down and so oversimplified and explained that you can be doing something else entirely and still keep up. Yeah, I don't know. Do you still find that as frustrating or
Yeah, and thankfully, I got to say right off the top of the bat, Lionsgate and Stars not that way at all. They totally understand. I always say it's the difference between leaning forward, wanting to know more, and leaning back and just having things thrown at you. I want the audience to lean forward. I want them to have questions. I don't want them to be confused, but I want them to have questions. The whole second screen thing, when I first read about that, my head exploded. It's like, I'm not going to make a second screen show. Why am I doing this? I'm not making wallpaper.
it feels like an insult to writers to ask them to do it, right?
It's a complete insult, of course. I mean, here's my feeling, this is also why I love Spartacus. You look at your phone for 2 seconds on Spartacus, you're not gonna know what the fuck's going on. You're gonna be completely lost. because of the language, you've really got to pay attention to what's going on. I am uninterested in writing a second screen show. I'm trying to engage the audience. I'm not trying to make white noise in the background. And I honestly, if you're not engrossed in the show, if you feel like, oh, I'm just going to check my phone, then the show's not working. It's not working. It's as simple as that.
I 100% agree with that, I have to say. We get a lot of people who are writers listen to the show. Would you potentially have 3 pieces of advice for writers maybe at the starting out level and maybe something in there for maybe a more experienced writer as well?
Yeah, I'm I'm always filled with advice. First and foremost, write what you're excited about. And when I was in school, I heard what every other writer heard, which was write what you know. But I think that can be misconstrued. It's not like, well, you're not an astronaut, so don't write anything about an astronaut. It's more like write what you're passionate about, and take that big swing. But the most important thing is that whenever I'm doing any spec work, I write what I'm most passionate about. During the strike, in between out there sticking it to the man, I started working on a Western. I always wanted to write a Western. I grew up loving Sergio Leone and spaghetti Westerns. So I wrote a Western, and that's the movie that I'm theoretically supposed to direct this summer, cast impending.
Very cool.
But look, the prevailing wisdom was Westerns don't sell. But I didn't care. I wanted to write a Western. So I wrote a Western. So yeah, that's my first bit of advice. Write what excites you and you're really passionate about, because that comes through on the page. I remember when I was in the grad program at UCLA. I was a graduate student in playwriting. Then I hung around to do a year of the TV and film, and I was in a feature writing class, and we had to talk about what we wanted to write. And it got to this one guy who said, I've read all the trades and this is what's selling. So this is what I'm going to write. And I always remember the instructor said, no, no, that is the wrong thing to do. Also, because that's hot now. By the time you finish this script and it gets out there a year later, you're behind the curve. You've got to write what you feel passionate about. So that's my first bit of advice. The second bit of advice for writers coming up through the ranks and trying to either break in or get to the next level is kind of similar. Keep writing. Write different genres, but genres you really care about. Don't write a romantic comedy if you don't want to end up on a TV show that's a romantic comedy. But if you're interested in action, sci-fi, horror, police procedural, dip your toe into everything, because you never know when the opportunity is going to pop up and somebody's going to say, "Oh, hey, so and so is doing a procedural based in Berlin during the Cold War. Do you have anything that we can share with them?" And you go, "Oh, you know what? I've got a procedural, you know, set in Russia during the Cold War. Take a look at this." So as close as you can get there, and that's not to say you have to be right on the money. I've read plenty of like spec pilots for Spartacus that weren't period, weren't action, but the writing was really good.
Right.
So yeah, write as much as you can. And if you have a job like on staff or something, don't stop writing those specs, because you could always sell it. You could always get your next job, especially since we don't do 22 episodes a year anymore. The hardest thing is for the staff writers, because you're on for anywhere from 3 to 5 months and then you're out of work. And you don't know when the show's coming back. It could come back in 6 months. It could be a year. It could be 2 years before they call you back. So you just never know. So you got to keep hustling. For established writers, You know, for people who are higher level, they will all know exactly what I'm talking about. Once you get to like the showrunner level, oftentimes it feels like the creative part of the job is about 30%. The other 70 is administrative and political because it takes up a lot of time. And, once that creative part, you're dealing with budgets and studios and release dates and publicity and press. And when you're doing the show, you're dealing with, actors and representatives and all kinds of things. And pretty much no show in history has ever gone off without a hitch. There's always bumps in the road and emergencies and stuff like that. But you really just gotta not lose sight of why you wanted to do this in the first place. Like, there are so many times I would come into work at House of Ashur, and there'd be issues, there'd be budget issues, casting issues. The actor that was perfect for this part can't get out of his contract for another thing. Like, we had a big issue. Todd Lasance, who played Caesar in the original, we really wanted him to come back and be Caesar this time around, but he's the star of his own show, NCIS Sydney. So we were hoping our schedules would work out. So we spent weeks working with the other production to try to see if we could, but he's like number one on the call sheet. So it just wouldn't work, which was heartbreaking and, aggravating and terrible. But even during those times, there's so many times I come into the room and my writers and I would talk about what a privilege it is to do this job, how incredibly lucky we are to come into a room every day with fantastic, creative, funny people and spend the day talking about stories. It's just one of the greatest gifts ever. And it's very easy in Hollywood or any entertainment business across the world to get bitter because they can grind you down. I've had very bad experiences, but it's really important to remember how amazing this job is. Yeah, I still pinch myself every day that I'm doing this. From where I grew up as a kid in South Jersey, as far away from movies and civilization as possible, to be able to travel the world and create these things. And I had one more bit on there: failure. It's like the dirty word nobody ever wants to talk about, the failures. I've had plenty of failures in my career, some of them very high profile. And I've got this wall behind me. It's like every show I've ever worked on, show or movie that got made. And when I was putting this together, I was going to leave out certain things. I was going to leave out the flops, like Viva Laughlin. Jupiter's Legacy didn't do well. The movie didn't really get great reviews. Pacific Rim Uprising, and I thought, well, do I really want to come in every day and see my flops? And then I remembered Joel Silver. Back when Joel Silver, the mega producer, had his offices on the Warner Brothers lot. I don't know if you ever visited that when he was there.
Not his office, no.
Yeah, I had various meetings in there for TV stuff, and you would go into the reception area of Joel Silver's Warner Brothers office, and there's no magazines. There's nothing to look at. His walls were covered with every single movie he had ever produced. It didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter if it was The Matrix. It didn't matter if it was Hudson Hawk. It was up on the wall. And I thought about that and I thought, you know what? That's exactly the way to do it because every single thing you get made is a miracle. And you should celebrate that, whether it was critically reviled and a flop and almost destroyed your career, doesn't matter. You got it made. So that's exactly the tact I took with my wall behind me. I'm like, no, look, Viva Laughlin was one of the biggest flops for CBS ever. It was still really hard work, and I learned a lot from it. So your failures really help you become a better creative as you go on. You just can't let it drag you down. And it's much harder in this day and age with social media because you have a failure and then every Yahoo out there takes a shot at you on social media. You got to tune that out. It's like a good example is Pacific Rim Uprising. Not the movie I set out to make, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's big budget filmmaking. This happens all the time, and there are people that whenever I say anything political or something like that, somebody will pop up and say, "Shut up! What do you know? You made Pacific Rim Uprising." But there are other people who said, "Hey, man, I took my kid to see it. It's his favorite movie. He's got all the toys." And I'm like, "Oh, great." And you never know. You also never know decades from now how people will feel. John Carpenter's The Thing is a perfect example. Huge flop. John Carpenter always talks about if people had actually liked it as much as they do now, his career would have been completely different.
Blade
Um,
Runner
Blade Runner
absolutely bombed at the time it came out. Yeah.
now is considered an absolute classic. Whenever I get depressed, I run a search on my computer for bad reviews of famous movies. And you get horrible reviews for The Godfather, Jaws, Star Wars. So you got to remind yourself that a lot of times with reviews, even with people just casually reviewing it on the internet, so much of that is built around what mindset are they in when they sit down to see them. Like when I first saw Blade Runner, I didn't like it. I saw it in a theater when it came out. And why didn't I like it? Because I was a huge Harrison Ford fan. I loved Han Solo in Indiana Jones, and that's what I expected. That's not what I got. So I was disappointed. And then when I revisited it, of course, it was like, oh my God, this is one of the greatest movies ever made.
Personally, I actually quite enjoyed Pacific Rim Uprising. I own it on Blu-ray. But I do think there is a thing with a lot of people on the internet these days where it's based around it's a grift. It's if you hate something, you can turn that into views, into money and whatever. Like, okay, so Stephen, we do this little thing at the end of each episode called Creator's Choice. This is a random choice made by you. We have numbers between 1 and 10. Each one's got a question that either gives us a little nugget of information about you or something in relation to your cultural consumption in recent times. So if you would like to give me a random number between 1 and 10.
5.
5. Current song or album you have on blast.
Oh my God. Okay. I am a man of the 80s. I was a teenager and into college in the 80s. I am perpetually stuck in the 80s. The song I have on blast right now is Poison's Talk Dirty to Me, because I'm trying to learn it on the guitar. I'm trying to learn that CC DeVille classic guitar stuff, and I have like 8 guitars and I suck. But I love playing, and that's been the song that's in my head constantly that I'm learning on the guitar.
I saw an article recently that said that the music that you listen to up to age, the most defining music you listen to is between 13 and 20. And that music kind of dominates your musical taste for the rest of your life, pretty much.
I am 110% stuck in the 80s.
Another number, please.
3.
Last streaming show you watched that you can't stop recommending to friends.
Oh, Slow Horses.
It's brilliant.
Gary Oldman is a world treasure. It is so well written, so well performed, so entertaining, and a perfect example of a show that exists in 6 episodes, and that's the sweet spot for that show. They tell just the perfect story in 6 episodes. I hope it goes on forever. I was actually really late to the series. One of my writers in House of Ashur, Dia Mishra, she was talking about Slow Horses and said, "Oh my God, you got to see it." And I'm like, so busy. So I started watching it during the break, and I just inhaled the first set of seasons until the next season came out, and just finished that one. Just absolutely brilliant. Really great stuff. Cannot recommend it enough.
It seems a weird twist of fate that Jackson Lamb has moved Gary Oldman to become Sir Gary Oldman in recent times.
I got to double up on that question. because there's another show I missed when it originally came out. New Girl, the
Oh, the Zoe
sitcom.
Deschanel. Yeah.
I had never seen it. I think when it came out, I was, working really hard. I think I was working on Spartacus, and I just, I just didn't see it. My wife started watching it on the recommendation of her sister, and I saw it playing, and I go, "Oh, what's this? Oh, it's New Girl." And I go, New Girl, probably not for me. I am so invested in that show. We're on season 2 out of 7. It is one of the sharpest written shows, perfectly performed. And, it's got 2 characters, Jess and Nick. And I am so invested in those 2 getting together, I cannot even tell you. I cannot wait for the end of each evening when my wife and I curl up and watch a couple of episodes. Just huge hats off to everybody that made that show. It's like a perfect sitcom.
Yeah. Good comfort TV, right?
Yeah, and the writing is so sharp and funny.
One more number from you to finish up with.
Give me 9.
Best compliment your work has ever received.
I immediately went to the worst comment.
Well, we could do that as well if you want.
The worst is when I was trying to break in. I wrote this feature, and they get read by readers who read it and do coverage, and then kick it up to their boss. And for some reason, my rep thought it was a good idea to send me the coverage of this script, and I'll never forget. It said my dialogue was wooden, wordy, turgid, and substandard. And it's like imprinted in my head. It's like, man. Not to mention that I got upset because, well, in this context, wordy and turgid mean the same thing. So that's probably the worst thing I've ever heard. I also heard when I started my career on MTV's Undressed, one reviewer said my scripts were workmanlike. So I had that early in my career. Best compliment I've ever received. I gotta say, there's a very touching message I got over social media after the run of the original Spartacus. This guy reached out and said, "Thank you so much for Spartacus. My father and I had been estranged. He was dying, and we bonded over watching Spartacus before he passed away." And I think that really touched me, to
Well,
know that our work can touch people beyond just entertainment, that it can, really resonate with someone. So that's probably the best compliment I've ever received.
yeah, I don't think like having that kind of impact, in someone's life, I don't think you can ask for more out of a piece of
Yeah.
work, you know. Last thing, is there any question I should have asked you that I haven't?
I don't know. I think you covered everything. I get maybe the biggest question: when does House of Ashur come out? December 5th.
December 5th, absolutely, and we will make sure we plug that on everything to do with the podcast as well, and make sure everybody knows.
You'll have to check. A lot of regions are day and date with the U.S., but you'll have to check. It might be sliding around some places international.
If anybody wants to catch up just before House of Ashur drops, all 4 seasons of Spartacus are currently on Netflix in this part of the world, UK and Ireland anyway, at the moment as well.
You can also just drop right into the show. We do a little intro, which sets the table. You'll get more out of it if you've seen the original, but you can totally just pick it up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for giving us the time, for talking to us. Always enjoy having a chat with you. And just to personally say again, you've always been extremely kind and gracious to me and helped me out many times in the past. So it feels only appropriate that I end this by saying gratitude.
Jess, anytime. It is always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for listening to State of the Arts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and that you can join us again in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, please remember that art matters.